Hello everyone, I'm Foibles, and today I'm going to look at the Chaos Tomes in Age of Wonders 4. I'm going to look at them in detail and talk about any potential synergies that you could use in your games. I am going to try and go through these quite quickly, because if I don't, we will be here all day. So let's start with Tome of the Horde. Turn your cheapest units into large, deadly armies. This tome really does specialize in tier 1 units, and nowhere is that more clear than with the hero skill, Battle Seeker Training. This is a support hero skill with no requirements that gives plus 20% damage to all tier 1 units. Fantastic. Combined with Spawnkin, your units gain more models but also get plus 20% damage. You can get plus 40% damage on your tier 1 units and just roll over the map very quickly, and that is what you will need to do. You cannot afford to sit on your laurels with Tome of the Horde. The downside of Spawnkin is the more models. You will take damage more quickly. You can somewhat mitigate the downsides of this by using the Tenacious racial trait, which makes casualties less impactful. However, what you want to avoid is having Spawnkin on high tier and single model units. Warbreeds, for example, go from 1 model to 3. Berserkers go from 3 models to 5. Especially on single model units, Spawnkin is awful and you want to avoid it at all costs. But you can mitigate that by having units from another race that don't have Spawnkin on them that you use to make your single model units and your high tier units, or you can summon your high tier units. Astral Tomes, for instance, have a lot of summons, as well as Chaos Tomes have some high tier demons that would not benefit from Spawnkin, and thus they don't have the problems of increased model count. Fury of the Horde is an interesting spell. It's very cheap, it only costs 10 mana. However, you'll often have better spells that you can be casting in small battles. In large battles, with 3 armies consisting of a lot of tier 1 units against large enemy armies, you'll get a lot more value out of this. But plus 1 strengthened is only 10% extra damage. It's nice to have, but it's not game changing. Blaze of the Horde is very difficult to get value out of because of its high mana cost, 15 for a tier 1 spell. If you only have 1 army with a few tier 1 units in it, this spell isn't going to do a huge amount of damage, even with the AoE. Other damage spells for the same price tend to be a lot more impactful, so it's a real shame. Summon Irregulars summons a unit that you can build in a city. This is really great because it has obvious synergy within this tome with all the benefits to tier 1 units that you already have, and it also is usually going to be a unit that costs gold upkeep instead of mana upkeep. Most summons cost mana upkeep, which means you are fighting for space with your enchantments, and it can be very difficult to get enough mana to have them all. Summon Irregulars doesn't have that problem. They're gold upkeep, which is much easier to maintain, so you can just print out large armies of tier 1 units using your world map casting points. The Houndmaster is a very, very interesting unit. You're really taking this guy for his Warhound. The Warhound is a tier 1 shock unit, which inflicts sundered defense and marked, making the enemy easier to hit. The really nice thing about the Warhound is if you don't already have a shock unit, which many cultures don't at tier 1, it gives you access to cancelling retaliation that you otherwise wouldn't have. The Houndmaster himself has an okay one-shot range ability, which does extra damage against marked units, but you're not really taking this guy for the Houndmaster himself, you're taking him for the Hound. Lastly, you have a province improvement in the form of the Mob Camp. This one is fantastic. It counts as a forester, and gives you 7 draft, 7 food, and makes tier 1 units 20% cheaper. You're going to want to build this soon, and you're going to want to take real advantage of that lower cost of tier 1 units, so you can use the momentum of having huge armies of very powerful tier 1 units to conquer the world before your enemies get higher tier tomes into play. The next tome on our list is the Tome of Pyromancy, which is all about fire damage and exploiting burning. And oh boy, does it exploit burning. Searing Blades makes all your melee units do extra fire damage and 20% damage against targets that are burning. Unless you're going up against fire immune enemies, this is a huge buff to have, and you're going to want to try and make sure that all the enemies you're fighting are burning before you hit them. This upgrade is also available to your heroes in form of searing weapons, which can also affect archer heroes. They can also get plus 20% damage against targets that are burning. You can also get fiery arrows, which gives your ranged units a chance of inflicting burning. So really, the point of pyromancy here is to inflict burning on your enemies first, then hit them with your melee units. You also get access to 2 really phenomenal battle mages, and you'll see later on, the Chaos Tomes really love their battle mages, possibly more than any other set of tomes. First of all, you have the Lesser Magma Spirit, a tier 1 battle mage, and there's not many of them. Tier 1 battle mages are quite rare, so being able to summon them is phenomenal. He also has Firebolts with a 60% chance of inflicting burning, which is quite a bit higher than the 30% offered by Fiery Arrows. So often, unless you are trying to specialize into archers for some reason, Chaos Tomes are better off with battle mages like the Magma Spirit. Burn your enemies and then get the extra 20% damage from Searing Blades with your melee units. This guy evolves into a tier 3 battle mage if you look after him. The tier 3 Magma Spirit is phenomenal. It has the ability to phase, leave behind burning terrain, and it has a powerful burning AoE. Speaking of burning AoEs, the Pyromancer is a battle mage you build in a city. This Pyromancer also has Firebolts as well as its Flame Strike ability. This is an AoE 1 hex radius, sets the hexes on fire, does loads of damage, and has a very high chance of inflicting burning. You're going to want a Pyromancer in every single army from now until probably the end of time. Being able to reliably inflict burning on all your enemies just really powers up your melee units. Fantastic unit. You also have access to 2 interesting spells here. Ignite is a very powerful single target spell. 25 fire damage, which is pretty good. It isn't very expensive at a cost of only 10 mana, and it is a guaranteed burning. This will work unless the target is immune to burning, and it also sets the terrain on fire, which is quite handy. It might spread to flammable obstacles, and it can affect other enemy units if they move through. The main benefit here, extra damage and burning, so again, you can take advantage of that plus 20% damage. Immolate is a very expensive spell. 30 mana, oof. For only 20 damage and an AoE, if they're burning, I'm not so sure about this one. If you are going to use it, to get value out of it, you're going to want to combine it with your Pyromancer's Flame Strike. Try and set everything on fire first, and then get that 20% combined damage from the enemy being burning. Next, let's have a look at the Tome of Revelry. This is a really interesting tome. It has lots of synergies inside and outside of the Chaos Tomes. First of all, the big thing to talk about is Reveler's Triumph, the hero skill. This provides a very unique effect. While Army Leader, all non-hero units gain plus 20% critical hit damage. Not crit chance, crit damage, which means you really can lean into having lots of very powerful crits. Any kind of enchantment, any kind of skill or benefit that gives you extra critical hits can then be synergized with Reveler's Triumph for the extra crit damage. And Tome of Revelry already has lots of ways to get extra crit chance in the form of morale. Reveler's Heart here means your target race has plus 50% morale from all sources. You can really combine this with Bannermen from the feudal culture, or Inspiring Chant from the Tome of Zeal to get loads of extra cheap morale boosts early on to raise your crit chance and benefit from Reveler's Triumph. Crit chance is great even without Reveler's Triumph, but if you have access to this skill, you should probably take it. Blood Fury Weapons is a melee unit enchantment which gives extra morale and strengthened when they kill a unit, as well as plus 2 physical damage. It's a nice bonus, it's probably not game-changing. The extra morale, of course, doubles down on the morale they already get from killing units, and it never hurts to have these extra buffs, plus 10% damage from killing, but it's not really gonna change the game significantly. The Skald is an excellent support unit. Her ranged ability can inflict insanity, which means the enemy unit might go around attacking its own allies. Unlike Berserk, where the enemy will prioritize its opponents, Insanity is just random units within range, so it might as well turn around and hit its allies. Perfect. Skald also has 2 excellent support abilities, one which gives 2 strengthened for extra damage, and one which gives 2 fortune for, oh look, that crit chance that we're after. Again, we really benefit from crit chance in the Tome of Revelry. The Song of Revelry gives extra morale, again, which we benefit from. Fast movement, ooh, I don't need to tell you how important it is to position your units properly. So fast movement is very nice, and this is a very rare ability. I find it quite difficult to get hastened on my units. The single stack of regen that the Skald gives is not a lot of hit points. It's not going to heal your units, so the Skald is by no means a healer, but this can maybe mitigate the damage from a retaliation attack here and there. Revels of Carnage is a very powerful spell if used correctly, plus 30% experience from combat for 3 turns. You want to use this before big battles to really make sure that your units level up quickly. This is especially beneficial with animals that can evolve from the nature tomes, which can summon animals. It's very good with your lesser magma spirits from the Tome of Pyromancy to help them evolve. Hell, if you're a feudal culture, you can evolve your pikemen if you feel so inclined. Lastly, we have Revels of Blood, which is a siege project. Now, Revels of Blood as a siege project does not give you any increased siege speed. It just gives you this benefit, 10 morale, and defending units lose 10 morale. It's a nice benefit, but without any other synergy, it's not going to make a huge difference. Fortunately, you do have synergy with Reveler's Heart. It also has very interesting synergy with the Tome of the Doom Herald, because you can inflict Prelude of Doom on the enemy army, so they already have minus 10 morale, which puts them at low morale automatically, so you could benefit from the damage bonus of the Cruel Weaponry enchant in Tome of the Doom Herald. Very nice, that's 30% bonus damage against low morale targets. It should also be mentioned that Reveler's Heart can affect your own race if they are undead from the Whiteborn major race transformation. That means that your undead units can't lose morale, but can still gain morale. But they'd only gain half the morale, so it's not really something worth building into by itself. You also have the Carnival of Flesh, your special province improvement, which gives +7 food, +7 draft. It's a farm. This one I'm not sold by. As a farm, it's not really a phenomenal improvement over what farms already give. Draft is good, but your farms aren't necessarily going to be scattered around exactly where you want them. Cost production, it's fine. Speaking of province improvements, I just realized I forgot to mention the Ritual Pyre from Tome of Pyromancy. This one is a phenomenal province improvement. A Forester that gives +10 mana. Yes, please. Foresters, or by default, give +2 food and +3 production, which isn't great. So swapping one of those out for extra mana, and potentially extra mana with adjacency bonuses, yes, I like that very much. Next on our list is the Tome of Mayhem. This is a very interesting tome that mostly focuses around this misfortune debuff, plus 10% fumble chance. Fumbles are half damage. Usually you get them by low morale, but misfortune is independent of morale. The ways you have of inflicting misfortune are with this Mark of Misfortune, which affects all ranged units, as well as skirmishers, which are sort of pseudo-ranged. Really works very well on repeatable attacks, especially from ranged and battle mage units. It should be noted that Mark of Misfortune inflicts misfortune automatically. There is no chance to roll. It's not like other abilities which have a 30, 60, 90% chance. It just inflicts misfortune. This is also available as a hero skill in the battle magic tree. Curse of Misfortune is a fantastic spell which inflicts misfortune. 2 misfortune and a 2-hex radius for only 30 mana. Really, really high value spell there. Can really cut down on incoming enemy damage, especially when you start to stack other stacks of misfortune. Misfortune, we'll talk about later, really works well with Tome of Pandemonium. You also get access to Summon Gremlin, which is a skirmisher unit. If you don't already have skirmisher units, this is one of the best that you gain access to because of his behind you ability. His ranged attack turns the enemy 180 degrees around, which means any bonuses to flanking, such as the sneaky racial trait or some of the flanker bonuses from nature, they're really useful here. Lots of good synergy. Even without those, turning the enemy around so you can flank them means you won't necessarily be hit by retaliation attacks as long as the enemy is not in defense mode. The Gremlin himself is also a little bit tricky to kill because of his displacement ability, although he doesn't have a lot of hit points. Still, fantastic unit for disrupting the enemy. You also have access to this Infectious Insanity spell. This one I find is very hard to get value out of, especially early in the game. It's a guaranteed chance to inflict Infectious Insanity, which causes insanity on the target unit, which we've talked about before, and has a chance of inflicting Infectious Insanity with its attacks. Realistically, you might get 1 or 2 spreads of Infectious Insanity. The whole enemy army is not going to turn around and hit itself. That's just unreasonable. And at 80 mana, very hard to get value out of this spell. But later in the game, when you start fighting very powerful tier 5 units, very powerful heroes, especially shock heroes, this can be very useful. So Confusion is a siege project, and it's one of my favorite early siege projects because it increases your siege speed by 3 for a cost of only 20 mana. That's really nice. Extra siege speed is always handy because more turns available that you don't spend sieging means you can do a lot more with your armies, and it stops the opponent from reinforcing. The actual benefits here, displacing the enemy units and giving them 1 stack of misfortune, that's nothing to write home about. But again, it's a really good siege project just for speeding up sieges for cheap, especially in the early game when you might not have lots of gold and mana to spare for expensive siege projects. Next on the list we have the Tome of Pandemonium. This tome is all about random negative status effects, and when it says random negative status effects, it doesn't mean any random negative status effects. In all my testing, and I've done a lot of testing of the spells in the Tome of Pandemonium, there are 5 negative status effects you can get. Weakened and Misfortune, you can get Berserk, you can get Insanity, and sometimes, quite rarely, you can get Stunned. Now, Havoc Magic itself gives your battle mages and support units, but mostly you're really doing this for the battle mages because of their repeating attacks, a 30% chance of random negative status effects. That's not great. I mean, you might get one of the good ones, the Berserk, the Insanity, the Stun. You might get one of the good ones on a low chance, which can be very helpful, though I'm not sold. But if you're going through this tome because of one thing, the Chaos Eater. The Chaos Eater is one of the most powerful units in the entire game, if used right. So you may as well pick up the Havoc Magic, maybe get some very powerful status effects on a low chance that could turn a battle around if you get lucky. Mass Hysteria also affects these same random negative status effects in a 1 hex radius. This one, unlike Havoc Magic, is a guaranteed status effect, so you could potentially gain Stunned in a 1 hex radius on all enemies, which would obviously be very powerful, especially since it's not a chance to stun, it would just happen, but the chance comes in the chance to get one of the random debuffs. And some of them, if you unfortunately roll Misfortune on Mass Hysteria and everything gets inflicted with Misfortune on a 1 hex radius, that's just a worse, more expensive version of Curse of Misfortune. So you really have to hope you get lucky with this one. Vessels of Chaos is a race transformation which gives you up to 30% damage as long as the target has 3 negative status effects. These don't have to be unique negative status effects. That's really important. If you have 3 stacks of the same negative status effect, you get 30% extra damage against the enemy. So you can have 3 stacks of Misfortune, and I don't need to tell you that 3 stacks of Misfortune is very easy to inflict with repeated attacks with Mark of Misfortune, or this Curse of Misfortune here. You can very easily get plus 30% damage against pretty much everything, as long as you build right and take advantage of some of the synergies, like Tome of Mayhem here. Now, I already said that the main selling point of this tome is this unit, the Chaos Eater, a tier 4 summonable fiend with Chaos Bolts and Consume Chaos. It is a battle mage. This is important. It's not a mythic unit. It benefits from all of the bonuses that you already have for your battle mages, so you can give it Havoc Magic, you can give it Mark of Misfortune. And these Chaos Bolts, you can actually, unlike other battle mages, shoot them right in the enemy's face. The Chaos Eater is a big boy. He does not care. He will not be pinned, and you do not have to sprint him away. That being said, the Chaos Eater's real shining skill is Consume Chaos here. It affects all enemies next to him, so in a 1 hex radius around him, and deals 12 random elemental damage for each status effect removed, and it heals him a bit. This starts to get really crazy when you can stack massive amounts of negative status effects, because you already know that Mark of Misfortune, repeated attacks can then 3 stacks of Misfortune. Those stacks of Misfortune count as 3 status effects, and so every single one deals 12 damage. You can cast Curse of Misfortune to get 2 Misfortune on everything. That's 24 damage on everything that you hit with Consume Chaos. It gets really, really ridiculous if you combine it with some of the other debuff spells from other affinities. For example, in the Tome of Scrying here, Mental Mark, a 1 hex radius, 2 marked, 3 sundered resistance, no chance of avoiding this. Unless you're immune to these debuffs, that's 5 debuffs. 5 times 12, well, you do the maths. That's a lot of damage, and it's even worse if you use this because sundered resistance lowers the enemy resistance to the random elemental damage that the Chaos Eater would be doing. This thing is an absolute beast when you synergize it properly with lots and lots of random negative status effects. I have in all my testing seen Chaos Eaters do 100 damage to enemies in a 1 hex radius, to every single enemy. That just wipes out an entire portion of an enemy army or a small enemy army by itself. Do not underestimate the Chaos Eater. It is ridiculously broken. If you also enchant it with the phasing enchantment from some of the Astral Tomes, the Tome of Teleportation, you can debuff a group of enemies, teleport the Chaos Eater into the middle of them, and kill every last one of them. It's nasty. Incite Revolution is a world spell. The target enemy city loses a border province and it spawns a brigand camp in its place. This is a really good way of feeding your enemy armies more experience and more items and more loot. I don't like this spell. It's a random province and it just gives a very minor disruption to the enemy. Probably more useful in multiplayer if you're fighting another human. Could potentially be very annoying, but against the AI especially, this is worthless and potentially even harmful to cast on them if you allow them to kill the brigand camp and then get the loot from it. You might be able to potentially benefit from it yourself in that regard, but yeah, I'm not sold on Incite Revolution. Let's move on to the Tome of Devastation. This tome says it specializes in sieges, and it is not kidding. It gives you 2 very, very, very powerful siege projects. Construct Devastator Spheres is one of my absolute favorites. 100 gold, 100 mana, and the real benefit, plus 8 siege speed. That is one of the highest bonuses to siege speed in the game. You can combine this with another siege project to easily get plus 10 or more and really, really burn down enemy cities very quickly. And that is what Construct Devastator Spheres is for. It is for burning down enemy cities at rapid speed. The Devastator Spheres themselves are bad. I don't like them, and maybe you'll get a little bit of value out of them, but really, what you want this for is for that plus 8 siege speed. If you want units in a siege that actually do anything useful, Unleash the Warhounds is your go-to. We already talked about the Warhounds. These are great little weak tier 1 shock units. Very handy to have. Having 6 extra units in a siege, that's a whole extra army. Yes, it's only an army of tier 1 units, but it's an army. And it only costs 50 mana. It's cheap. The only downside? No bonus to siege speed. But if you have enough siege projects and you can get enough siege speed from other sources, then you're fine. Flame Burst Weapons is a very, very powerful unit enchantment, plus 20% crit chance. This is independent of morale, and of course has great synergy with Tome of Revelry. And also, enemies explode when you kill them. with all your melee units. The fire damage explosion does not affect your units, it only affects adjacent enemy units, so very easy to avoid taking any damage there yourself. Flame burst weapons is also available for your heroes, very nice. The only downside of this is it's very expensive in both gold and mana upkeep. It really will hurt your bank when you cast it, but it's very powerful. Focus of Devastation is... I'm not sold on this one. It's a nice little bonus to your battle mages, and you'll probably have a lot of battle mages if you're going heavily into Chaos Tomes. The real selling point here is being able to cancel defense modes, because of course you can do extra damage and you're not at risk of retaliation attacks. You can even flank units if you cancel their defense modes. But, I mean, compared to something like Flame Burst weapons or many of the other Battle Mage bonuses we'll see, this one is on the weaker end. The Warbreed is a very nice shock unit, heavy charge strike. This unit displaces enemies when it hits them, so it takes their place and pushes them back, which can be very useful to follow up the next turn with its powerful Power Cleave ability, which cancels defense modes and hits 3 units in a little tiny 1 hex cone next to it. Very nice. Again, I already talked about Spawnkin, but this is a single model unit by default. Avoid having Spawnkin on this thing at all costs. It does benefit from all your racial transformations. One thing I do like with Warbreeds is to combine them with emergency teleportation from the Tome of Teleportation and just teleport them into the middle of an enemy line and power cleave them straight away. That is a very nasty little synergy. Moving on now to our tier 4 tomes, we have Tome of the Demon Gate. This one is all about fiends, and it has some very interesting, some very powerful abilities. First of all, what's great about it is you get the access to this teleporter here. It's more expensive than a regular teleporter, but it doesn't cost mana upkeep, and it lets you build fiends in your cities, which can be useful later on for Fight for Power, which we'll come to. But having more teleporters is always good. You could also build this alongside another regular teleporter if you felt so inclined for some reason. One of the real selling points of this tome is the fact that you get the major race transformation of the Chaos Tomes, Demon Kin. Turns the target race into demonic beings, giving them Demon Kin for burning immunity and Desolate Walk, flying, which is even faster movement. Really good on the world map, really good for being able to move through your own units in regular combat, and Frenzy, so you get 1 strengthened every time you land a hit, which does work with repeating attacks, so if you hit 3 times, you'll get 3 strengthened, which is plus 30% damage. Very nice. What this doesn't do is it doesn't turn your units into fiends, and the reason for that is Demonic Anthem here. This is your support hero skill. While this unit is the army leader, friendly non-fiend, non-hero units transform into tier 1 fiends upon death. This is very handy for having sacrificial units, as well as potentially using Fight for Power on them later. Fight for Power, 2 fiends fight each other and you pop out a fiend with a tier 1 level higher than before. So 2 tier 1s become 1 tier 2 and so on. I really like this for pumping out higher tier fiends that are normally very expensive or difficult to get, particularly the Balors from Tome of the Chaos Lord. This can give you access to powerful tier 5 units early on. Frankly, if I'm going for a debuff build with Tome of Pandemonium, I just like having more Chaos Eaters. Chaos Eaters are very strong. You also have access to Sacrificial Slaughter, which is a spell which blows up your own unit. Enemy units within 2 hex sustain 10 fire damage per tier of the unit and suffer 1 random debuff. Yeah, I said it that way round for a reason. It doesn't matter if you sacrifice a tier 1 or a tier 5 unit. In all my testing, it's only 1 random debuff, not up to 5. Very sad and slightly confusingly worded. I suppose 5 random debuffs would be a little bit strong. Often I find that Sacrificial Slaughter really inflicts a lot of stunning, and because it does it in a 2 hex radius, a 2 hex radius stun, that's ridiculous. Especially because you can use this on combat summons. Why not summon 5 vines from Vine Prison and then overchannel and blow one of them up to stun everything in a 2 hex radius? Ooh, that's that's pretty nasty. I think if I was on the receiving end of that, I would not be very happy. So yeah, using it on combat summons or throwaway fiends from the Demonic Anthem, really handy there. You also have access to a terraforming spell. The only terraforming spell in the Chaos Tomes. Turns the target province and adjacent province into desolate terrain, dealing 10 fire damage to enemies. As long as all your units can move quickly over desolate terrain, and the enemy can't, that really slows them down and speeds you up. And of course, Demonkin and Fiends already move quickly on desolate terrain. Plus, it's some extra damage, and it can affect all the enemy armies in the province, so doesn't matter 1 enemy, 2 enemy, 5 enemy armies, they'll all take 10 fire damage, which isn't a lot, but if you hit 5 armies, then it adds up. And desolate terrain is largely useless and slow to move through for everyone except you. You also get this demonic summoning spell. Summon 2 random tier 3 or 4 fiends from a free city vassal. It makes them sad and it kills their population, but you're a demon summoner, you don't care. And then you can immediately turn around and cast Fight for Power on those tier 3 or 4s and print out higher tier units. This gives you early access to your Balors or even just more Chaos Eaters if you're lucky. So, very powerful spell. Never mind that your vassals will be upset with you, just print out more units and use them to take over the world. Rush that momentum, burn everything to the ground. Very nice tome. Possibly lacking compared to our other tier 4 tome, Chaos Channeling. Now this tome offers a lot of synergy with all the other tomes in the Chaos branch. Especially Tome of the Horde and Tome of Pyromancy. Starting off, you have Chaotic Rebuke, pretty middling hero skill. Again, 60% chance of random status effects. It's those same random status effects that all the Chaos Tomes use. Not really sold on this one, especially because it's a battle magic skill. This would be a lot more useful if it was a warfare skill, and you could use it on a combat hero in the middle of a fight with all the enemies up and hitting him. So that's a bit disappointing. But the rest of the tome makes up for it. Scion of Flame is a minor race transformation that gives you similar benefits to Demonkin, but rather than being able to fly, you get Fiery Wake, so you set the terrain on fire when you pass over it, and you are immune to burning. You also get some fire resistance and Vengeful Flames, which can fire damage and inflict the enemy with burning. So this, of course, synergizes really well with the Tome of Pyromancy, where you can get bonus damage to burning enemies. Speaking of synergy, Golden Horde summons a whole army of tier 1 units. It costs 400 mana and 400 casting points, so it's not cheap, and it's not quick. But if you can just pump out an entire army of powerful buffed tier 1 units with Spawnkin and potentially fit in a hero with Battle Seeker training, those tier 1 units can cause some real trouble. Fan the Inferno is a spell which essentially, you use it for the guaranteed burning. It does a reasonable amount of fire damage. It's quite an expensive spell at 150 mana and 60 casting points, and unfortunately, it's worse in every way than Lava Burst from the Tier 4 Materium Tome. But you might not be going Materium, so don't worry about it. Fan the Inferno, put burning on everything and do bonus damage to it, and yeah, quite nice. Especially the 2 hex radius is always pleasant. The AI always tends to bunch up its armies. Gremlin Ambushes is a sustained city spell. Target a city and you get gremlins, up to 5. You can target enemy cities, fight in their domain and get bonus gremlins. If you combine this in a siege, 5 gremlins and 5 warhounds, that's 11 extra units. That's almost 2 full armies that you can have on top of the enemy. They're going to be really outnumbered and they're not going to like you. Lastly, we have Demonic Focus. Possibly one of the best Battle Mage buffs in the game. As I've said before, Chaos Tomes really like their Battle Mages. Whenever another unit dies in battle, +1 strengthened and +5 temporary hit points. Your Battle Mages get stronger as any unit dies. Any unit. Doesn't matter whether it's an ally, an enemy, a combat summon, whatever. As long as it dies, your Battle Mages keep getting stronger and they keep getting healed. It affects support units too, but Battle Mages are where the real power is. So yes, you get access to one of the best Battle Mage enchantments that there is. Just turning your already powerful Battle Mages into even greater monsters. And, of course, you should already have the Tier 4 powerhouse that is the Chaos Eater. A Chaos Eater which heals himself even more and gains 5 strengthen just from things dying. Nasty. Very nasty. Lastly, of course, is our Tier 5 tome, Tome of the Chaos Lord. Like all Tier 5 tomes, it's sort of a win more thing. You get your Tier 5 tome out, and you just conquer the world with it. The buffs here are overpowered, but that is true of all Tier 5 tomes are ridiculously powerful, and in fact this might be one of the weaker ones, but that doesn't mean that it's not good. You start with this hero skill, it's a warfare skill. Summons a random tier 1 fiend whenever this unit kills another unit. Chance it can be tier 2. That's nice. I mean, warfare heroes are strong. They're probably going to do a lot of killing. And killing a unit and summoning another unit, that's a 2-unit swing. 1 less for them, 1 more for you. That's quite powerful. But everything in this tome is powerful. Especially Call Forth Avatar of Chaos summons an avatar of your ruler in battle. The avatar has the same abilities as your leader and spawns with full action points. All fiends and demonkin gain +10 morale. This is really, really handy because your ruler is bound to be one of your most powerful units. You can't use it in a battle which your ruler is already in, however. That being said, your ruler is also one of the keystones of your empire. If they die and you lose your throne city, that's it, the game's over. Even if you're at no risk of losing your throne city, losing your ruler is a major downside. No spells, no diplomacy for several turns. Ouch. So you can use this to make sure you don't put your ruler at risk. And still benefit from them in battle. They can just sit at home doing whatever, and you can summon them in. It's 150 mana to summon them in, and it's very powerful. Demonic Onslaught, speaking of powerful, is a very, very, very strong buff. Killing Momentum and Hastened. So Killing Momentum, you probably know this from the hero skill, when it's a high-tier warfare skill for heroes, it regains 1 action point when killing another unit. Especially powerful with shock units like the Warbreed. This can be really nasty. So it just means that your units can rush in even faster with their fast movement and potentially kill 2 units in one turn. Very scary. The Balor, well, the Balor speaks for himself. He can curse enemy units to be berserk and turn into tier 1 fiends. You can do all sorts with these extra fiends you get from Demonic Slaughter or from Chaos Brand with your Balors. I particularly like sacrificing them with Sacrificial Slaughter to stun or otherwise debuff my enemies and do extra damage to them. The Balor himself does loads of damage. He's a powerful mythic unit. Mythic units, sadly, don't get your unit enchantments. Otherwise, it'd be too powerful. Frankly, I think compared to the absolute monstrosity that is a properly synergized Chaos Eater, the Balor looks tame in comparison. But he's still a tier 5 unit, he's very powerful, he's hard to kill, and he can even make more units for you in battle. It costs 2 population to summon him, but by the time you have access to a tier 4 tome, you shouldn't care. Your cities should already be built up as much as you really need them to build up, and by the time you have your tier 5 tome, it's just about printing out as powerful armies as you can and conquering the world. So, never mind, ignore this 2 population loss, it's not a huge deal. Not as big a deal as it seems. Insight Rebellion is a siege project. Again, you seem to get plenty of these in the Chaos Tome. This one costs 150 gold, 150 mana, and gives a decent 6 bonus to your siege speed. The benefits here, this minus 50 city stability, this isn't anything to write home about, especially not for a tier 5 tome. This is completely ignorable. Even being on the receiving end of this is barely noticeable. 2 mind-controlled units can potentially be really nice. Obviously, if you end up mind-controlling 2 tier 1 units, that's not very interesting at all. But this siege project can mind-control heroes if you get lucky. You could have mind-controlled enemy heroes in the enemy backline. Even if they don't get to do anything, the enemy will probably spend their first turn trying to kill these 2 mind-controlled units, giving you time to position yourself. Again, it's not special, but it's a decent siege project, and by the time you get it, you'll probably be running from city to city, trying to kill them all, raise them as quickly as possible. So it's nice to have good disruption for the enemy and a solid bonus to your siege speed. And that is all of the Chaos Tomes. There's lots of really interesting ways to play Chaos, lots of bonuses to battle mages, bonuses to low tier early rush builds, and very powerful access to debuffs and ways to make use of those debuffs. So overall, I really enjoy the Chaos Tomes, and I hope this video has given you some insight into interesting ways to combine their abilities and maybe synergize them. If you did like this video, please leave a like and possibly consider subscribing to the channel, and that way I'll know to do the rest of the different affinities. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks very much.